Oh, Captain, my Captain, it's time for another episode of Continual Fandom. And tonight, well, we're going to stir up one of those age old questions. We're going to be talking about who is your favorite Star Trek captain and why. So, I'm your host, Jim Nettles. And before I have to be beamed out of here for my own protection, let's go around and see who else is here to join into the debate. So, Robyn, you're up first.
Hi, I'm Robyn. I am co-host of a podcast called Diversity Issues, where we talk about diversity in indie comics.
Dennis?
I'm Dennis Myers. I'm the author of the Rise of the Automated Empire series, 4 books. They're available on Amazon now.
And Nancy.
I'm Nancy Northcott. I write historical fantasy for Falstaff Books, and I independently publish several different kinds of romance and the Outcast Station science fiction series that I write with Jeannie Adams.
So coming out of the gate, we're just going to start the swinging right out of the way. So I'm going to ask that age-old nerd question. It is not Star Wars or Star Trek. It's going to be, is it Kirk or Picard? So Robyn, we already teed this up a little bit. That nerd card is on the line. That comm badge is threatening to be beamed away. You might be left out on your own. Let's hear it.
I'm going to be stranded on an M-class planet for this one. I have watched almost every Star Trek series except Next Gen. I know that is like the biggest sin that a Trekkie can commit. I have earnestly tried multiple times, and I get partway through the first season and I'm just like, nope, can't do it. Scroll through, find DS9 or Voyager and just rewatch one of those. So I abstain from the question.
You're pleading the fifth.
I plead the fifth.
Robyn, just trust me. Get through the first season, because that's the one where they're trying to figure it. Remember, that's the first time they did Star Trek since the original series. Once they get through the first season, the second season is better, and the third season is gold. After the third season, it's awesome.
Everyone I've talked to has said that the third season is where it actually gets good. And some people have said, like, oh, just start with the third season. It's just something about me. I just can't. I have to watch it all the way through. So I'm trying to get like some of my friends to watch it with me, so then I can just complain at them half the time. Because if I'm home by myself and I'm just like looking at walls like, what is this? But then I can complain with my friends to get one of them to watch it with me. And then this was like back in the golden age of TV. Getting through the first 2 seasons is 44 episodes. They made 12 seasons back then.
I would place the golden age of TV a couple of decades earlier, but yeah, you do you.
To the moon there, Dennis, to the moon. So, Dennis.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you, who's your captain? Kirk
I grew up as a child every night, Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock, watching the original Star Trek. I memorized half of those episodes. But that was a long time ago. By the end of The Next Generation, for me, it would have been a tie between Jean-Luc Picard and William Shatner as Jim Kirk. But by the end of Picard, the Paramount Plus show, no. Picard blows him away. Jean-Luc Picard for the win, between the two.
Nancy?
Well, sometimes it's a hard choice because, Picard's got that British accent and he drinks Earl Grey tea. And, I got a soft spot for both of those things. But I, too, was introduced to it through the original series. And I have a tendency to be loyal to what I first fall in love with. And that would be Kirk. And honestly, Picard is great. Patrick Stewart is wonderful in the role. but you can't beat Kirk for sheer flash and dash. And so I'll go with Kirk.
Fair enough. Jim?
What? I'm the host. I don't have to answer.
No.
these.
No,
No.
there's only four
You
of us.
said you were going to be part of it.
Chime in.
So, all right. So if I look, because again, I too was raised on the original Star Trek, I have learned much of my management style from Kirk.
God
I have
help
learned much of my appreciation for the rules from Kirk. When I study Picard,
I was gonna say, so you make weird faces at your employees half the time?
no, I make
Oh.
dramatic pauses. when I go being a big fan of Next Gen and looking at Picard and the nature of the series and the storytelling and that notion of leadership and poise and everything else, there's a great deal I have taken away from the influence of the one and only Jean-Luc Picard, of being willing to, go through that phase of learning diplomacy, but yet still being happy to swing a big stick when necessary. I, however, have not yet learned the lesson of having an Oscan drive a sharp, pointy object through my chest to take out my heart. It wasn't there to begin with anyway. So just because of how I was raised, Kirk edges just slight. So, but again, I love both of them for what both of them are, but you got to go with what you started with. But I will tell you what puts it over the edge for me, and will every single time. It's going to be two things. Number one is from Wrath of Khan, that that beautiful thing. And number two is the music video of why is Captain Kirk climbing a mountain? Captain Kirk is climbing a mountain. Why is Captain Kirk climbing a mountain? Jean-Luc Picard has not had that music video yet. So that's where he's going to edge him out for me just slightly. Yes, Jean-Luc has had some other singing opportunities.
Yeah.
But it was not, why is Captain Picard roaming the vineyards? Why is Captain Kirk roaming the vineyards? Well.
Yeah. They had that Christmas song with Picard. Make it so, make it so, make it so.
Had that? But yeah. So Dennis, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Okay.
So taking a look at, if we just kind of go across all of the various series, which of the captains, and this is an unfair question, which is why I'm going to ask it, what captain is for you the least Starfleet captain, and why?
Well, Dal on Star Trek Prodigy. He's not Starfleet to begin with. He's a kid. He doesn't know what he's doing, but he's learning. And I have to say, shout out to Hologram Janeway, complete with the hologram cup of coffee. So yeah, he's a no-brainer for that one. Absolutely.
Nancy?
Well, I haven't seen some of the side series. We don't watch a lot of streaming, but I'm going to go with Archer. I like Scott Bakula as an actor, but Starfleet was just beginning to gel in that show. And there was just something about that version of it that just didn't really click for me. So I'll say Archer.
Robyn?
Oh man, I feel like I'm gonna have to abstain again. I feel like that's one of the things that I love about Star Trek as a series is that there are so many different facets to it. Each of the captains, I feel like there's some overlap between some of the captains and what they bring to Starfleet, mostly because of the situations that they're put in. I find personally that for Strange New Worlds, Pike has that kind of like middle of the road with a lot of fans kind of expect Star Trek to be. But I feel that some of the other captains bring different aspects to what Starfleet is and what it means to still be human in a time where we have kind of moved beyond some of the social hangups that we have now, but it's still like the ideological representation of what we want to be, and we're still kind of like moored by what it is to be human. And all of the different captains to me make it feel more grounded in what is truly like a human institution, a human society, because we're not going to be monolithic. We're not going to be the same across the board. We're not going to have all of the same experiences in all of these different portions of space. So I feel like, for me at least, that's one of the reasons that I like Star Trek so much, is that it shows so many different facets of what we will be in the future. So I feel like really all of them are even, and I thought both Nancy and Dennis gave great answers for those respective reasons. But I also feel in the regard, like with Nancy, with you saying Archer, it's like, you're right. We weren't really even Starfleet. We were Starfleet, but we weren't the Federation at that point. And then with Dal, it's like the Federation doesn't exist in that part of space where they exist, but it's formulating the ideals that make Starfleet what it is. And they bring different aspects of that to their respective shows. And I apologize for that really long-winded answer. To
Well
just
said.
not
Well
answer.
said.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, and I'm going to take a little bit different tact from it, because again, one of the things that we've seen a lot of outside of the mainline captains are captains that are under different kinds of stress. You know, where we've seen, if we go back to original series, we often saw captains, who've lost their entire crews, or, we see things happen. If we look throughout, even Next Gen, we'll go to the beloved first season, and the plot line that just got cut off after they blew up somebody in the one scene that everybody said was too gross for Star Trek. And I remember seeing that first run. But for me, there's one captain that all of them, even in their own ways, all seem to hold on to that. The one that got me, and I as I was kind of thinking this through, because again, somebody had to ask questions, so I got a little bit of advanced thinking about these, is from the Kelvin timeline, and Peter Weller's captain that he plays, where it is, and I forgot the captain's name on that one, but he's there and leading the big dreadnought out, and he is running so much of an underground about the Federation and the political allegory and everything that was happening. But my challenge that happened with Peter Weller's captain that was there was they didn't set him up to be that strong captain. Throughout the entirety of it, he was set up to be your traditional villain. And I think in that, you did not get to see the strength of a fallen Federation or Starfleet captain. What you saw was that notion of somebody that was presented as always and throughout the entirety of the film as being, the predictable villain. And that for me was the captain that was a big miss in the film, was that notion of he never came off as that strong Starfleet Federation captain who was doing the wrong thing for the right reasons, sort of a modality. And that for me was one of the big failings out of the film, and him as that character.
Was that in Into Darkness?
Yes.
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 Thank you.
I think there's two things they could have done there. Taking your idea of showing him as a captain, I think they should have showed him on his own ship in command, finding the Botany Bay, finding it, giving commands. You see him in command, you could see that and know that the Botany Bay is involved. And the other change I would have made is John Harrison would have been John Harrison, Khan's right-hand man and weapons designer, not
Correct.
Khan himself. But I digress.
No, and I agree. And I mean that's where to me there were a couple of the big misses there, and that was to me the loss. Second place, and I have just forgotten his name as well, is the captain from the original Star Trek movie. That
Decker?
just
Decker.
Decker, thank you. Was Decker in that one, did not carry that same level of presence and was too easy to surrender his ship.
Mhm.
And that bothered me even as a kid. That's the two that I'm going to pull out. Even though I think he had that Starfleet modality, he wasn't a captain, especially for the
That
Enterprise.
first one, especially.
Sorry,
I
Robin,
think
go
that
ahead.
first one, especially, is a great answer. I was just saying, I think that first one, especially, is a great answer from the Into Darkness movie. But he played that so well. When the reveal happened, and he was like, "Who's gonna keep us safe? You?" And it makes so much sense that he is the least Starfleet, because even though you can wear the uniform, you can have the badge, it's also, I feel like the ideals of Starfleet are supposed to be like an anchor. Like, you're still kind of like floating in this like sea of ideas, but what Starfleet is still grounds you and anchors you. And even if the captains kind of start to fall away from that, them being Starfleet pulls them back to center. And with his, it was completely disconnected. You know what I mean? Even though Starfleet is kind of like pseudo militarized, they are really more so about, cooperation, exploration, understanding. And I feel like almost kind of like the military serves a function of it, serves more of just kind of administrative purposes, almost kind of.
Yeah.
Whereas he took that militaristic ideal to a place where Starfleet was actually trying to take human history away from. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. That's you guys all had great answers.
So Nancy, I'm gonna start with you on this one, and I'm gonna pick what is one of my favorite Star Trek series of them all.
Okay, but no pressure.
No pressure at all. And is often one of the most controversial captains. I'm going to go to DS9.
Ooh.
Because I am a huge fan of Cisco. I've gotten to meet Avery Brooks. I've told the story before. DS9, and I know a lot of people either loved it or hated it, even going back to the days. I remember the night it premiered because we were going to go out, we were going to go see a band, we had some people coming over and everything else. And it was like, great, we were recording it, we're recording the premiere of DS9, and we were like, all right, let's watch the first couple of minutes. And as it delved straight into that Battle of Wolf 359 and just came out swinging and never really stopped. And we wound up being drug out to go to the concert and then coming back at some ungodly hour and watching the entirety of the pilot in the middle of the night. But Avery Brooks to me was almost that perfect captain, the perfect broken captain of the perfect broken station. So Nancy, what were your thoughts on DS9, Cisco as that captain and that situation?
Well, it was very different. I mean, I think it's good that it started with action, because a lot of the conflict on DS9 is interpersonal conflict. It's not battles, it's not fights, it's other issues. And Avery Brooks has a presence that I think was necessary to make Cisco stand out like a captain above all these other people. I mean, he's kind of like Picard in that he's not on the away team or the DS9 equivalent of the away team. That's Kira and Odo, who are in charge of maintaining order on the station. And they're the ones who, especially Kira, tend to wait in swinging sometimes. That's not his job. And I think it's hard to pull off a Star Trek captain because it is a melding of ideas and action in Star Trek if you're not mixing it up in the middle of it, because you have this big tradition of Starfleet captains wading in and straightening it out. And Avery Brooks carried that. I'm not sure an actor who didn't have that kind of presence could have pulled that off. But I thought he did a really great job with it. It's a very different captain's role. It's in some ways a quieter captain's role. But when push comes to shove, his is the last word. And you believed that when push comes to shove, he's got the final say. And so I thought he did a great job. I liked DS9.
Robyn?
To make sure I stay on point, can you repeat the question? I was enthralled with what Nancy was saying, and I lost track of what the question was.
Well, the question really is about Sisko as captain.
Okay.
And I mean, for me, I'll kind of go ahead and throw a little bit of my answer to this too. The reason I really loved DS9 was because you got to see the Federation as how it really kind of operated with the rest of the world. It wasn't a starship where it was just the military command. It was seeing how you had to operate mixed with civilians and traders and a station in the middle of a war. And you got to see him go through war and peace and family and love and recovery and loss. I mean, you got to see somebody living as a captain more than just the drama of what happens on a ship or what happens on the station. So, I mean, what were your thoughts, and again, of Sisko as captain?
So, I feel that my feelings on Sisko are different from a lot of others because my mom's Trek was original series. My dad's Trek was DS9. So I knew of these characters, but my first Trek was Voyager. So a lot of people my age, their first Trek was Next Generation. So their idealistic captain was Captain Picard. Their idealistic Starfleet was on the Enterprise. Mine, being Voyager, was more of how these ideals of a society that we have struggled to build for ourselves are tested in this dark place where they're in the Delta Quadrant and they're dealing with that. So a lot of the hangups I feel that people have around Sisko and it being kind of like a darker character and a darker representation of Starfleet, to me, that was kind of on par because, I came into my own understanding of Starfleet through Voyager. So to me, DS9 and Voyager as well feel more realistic. They feel more tethered to now because I feel that I see a lot of our current issues are reflected across all of Star Trek, but I feel personally that some of the things that they had to go through in DS9 and in Voyager kind of harkens back to ideologically some of the things that we are struggling with and that we're dealing with now. And it makes more of a through line for me of how we get from where we are to where we want to be. And that is where we want to be, being Starfleet. So I actually looked at Sisko's portrayal of a Starfleet captain and of DS9 as a show as more of a call to us in the now. I didn't realize at the time that that was how I looked at it until I started absorbing some of these other treks. But to me, it feels more like a call to, yes, we're struggling with these things. Yes, we're looking at our own history. For them, our present is their history. We're looking at that and feeling how we're going to overcome those things and being hopeful as a person that that's what we can get to. I actually saw the show as more hopeful than a lot of people do, because to me, it tethers them to us and it shows despite what we're going through, we can get there. Sorry, another long answer.
Great.
No, and I'm going to Voyager next, just to give you that hint, because it's going to start with you again. But
Okay.
we'll loop back around. Dennis, how about you and Cisco?
For me, I mean, like I said, I grew up on TOS, and then I watched all of the Next Generation, and the Next Generation is just TOS upgraded. Deep Space Nine for me was the first time they gave us a Star Trek that was so different that they could tell different kinds of stories. And Cisco, as first the commander and then later the captain of that station, was a different kind of man. He was damaged. Wolf 359, that hurt. Several episodes dealing with those things in the wormhole where, like, well, you live here, which is where his wife is dying. Very powerful stuff. But the show as a whole gave us things like, instead of Guinan all nice and happy behind the bar, we have Quark. It's, I mean, come on. That was so much fun. And then my favorite character, the whole favorite storyline was Garrick and how he's just a tailor. Nah. So I really enjoyed Deep Space Nine. And I think that I'm really hoping someday they bring Cisco back and show where he's been and what he is now, because you can't go through that change that he went through at the end and not become something more. I think that would be fascinating to find out.
Yeah, I've been waiting on that one for years. And years and years. So
Well, Picard was a success, so there's hope.
So, Robyn, you started talking about the fact your first Trek was Voyager, right?
Mhm.
And I was a big fan of Voyager as well. I know, again, that was one of those that was maybe sometimes hit or miss. But, the fact that they came out and said, no, we're going to have our first woman captain. And the fight that they went through with that, and also setting it up for somebody who was on their own, fundamentally. It was set up conflict with him and the McKee. There was a lot of structured conflict there. That I think they lost some of that in later seasons. It just became a sport of the week. But the first few seasons, to me, in watching that, how is Janeway for you as your captain?
So when Voyager comes out, I am 15, 16. I grew up in a time where, women's empowerment was a thing, but it was still something that we were, societally struggling with. It was something that I feel like we talked about in theory, but still struggled with having it in practice. And this is, of course, reflecting back now as an adult to how I didn't really have the words at the time to understand my feelings as a teenager. But being someone who was always into fandom, into science fiction, into things of that nature, actually seeing not just a strong woman character, but a woman in the lead. And not just her, but also her chief engineer. And having that representation at that time was a big deal for me, especially as a young person coming of age, trying to figure out, my place in the world, what I wanted to do with my life, where my goals were going to be. And then again, just thinking about what I wanted for, not just for myself, but for the world, and having that character define Starfleet for me, growing up in a time and a place where, and we still do, like, humanity just struggles to figure out how we are just going to be good to each other. And having this group of people that were connected by ideals, but this kind of outcropping of people who were split apart from them, and you had this contention between them, but they were in this situation and they found a way to make it work because they needed each other, and they found a way to be resourceful, to be hopeful when they could be, to just acknowledge that things were hard for them. You know, these were things that I absorbed as a teenager that I didn't have the words to understand how they impacted me until now as an adult. Like when I've rewatched the series like 2 or 3 times, but like being an adult and having the language around how that impacted me as a person, not just the way that I look at Star Trek. But yeah, that's one of the reasons why I view Starfleet and Star Trek the way that I do.
Dennis?
When Voyager first showed up on the screen and that music played, I have to admit, of all the Star Trek series, Voyager is my favorite opening theme.
I can hum that whole theme.
So it was also the age when people were on bulletin boards and people were, the online had begun. And a lot of the initial criticisms about Janeway were things like how she was micromanaging her junior staff and how she was, she was just so abrupt in so many cases. And I was in the Navy for 10 years. I've served under captains like her. She was the most realistic military leader of all the Star Trek captains that I remember. And Kate Mulgrew was absolutely perfect for the role. I enjoyed her portrayal 100%. Even, well, maybe not, the lizard thing was a little bit too much.
The salamander babies.
I want to see what happened to the babies. So yeah, Voyager was awesome, and the whole idea that Janeway would come back in time and change the timeline to save her crew was just that was Janeway. Absolutely. So and one of the greatest pleasures I had when Prodigy came on, and there's hologram Janeway, as the training hologram, and she's got a hologram cup of coffee. I loved it. Oh, it was great. I'm looking forward to season 2 of Prodigy, by the way. More Janeway.
Nancy?
I really loved Voyager. I could have done without the Vidians, to be honest, because they were a little gross for me, but it was different, and it was something new, and it was high stakes anytime they came on the screen. I remember Kate Mulgrew as Mary Ryan in Ryan's Hope. Mm-hmm. That soap opera debuted the year I went to college. And it was Kate Mulgrew as Mary Ryan and Richard Hatch as whatever her boyfriend's name was. And both of them went on to science fiction fame and fortune. But I remember the controversy about, you're going to make a woman captain, which makes, compared to the upheaval over Captain Marvel erasing men from the Marvel universe, it was a tempest in a teapot. But at the time, as Robyn said, we're kind of struggling with gender roles and changes to traditional roles. And most of the women I knew were, it's about daggum time. But we were also feeling like she has to be good, because a lot of us had been the first something. And if you're the first something and you don't do a good job, you're going to be the last something. And so I was kind of looking at it from that perspective. And I thought she did a great job. I think there was another actor cast in that role originally who was physically larger. Not just, Kate Mulgrew is petite and slender, and this woman was more average and a little taller maybe than some. And so I was thinking, you're really going to cast somebody that comparatively small? There again, presence. and she pulled it out and went toe to toe with all kinds of people and all kinds of situations. And I never went, oh, they're faking it. They wouldn't really. No, I found it really believable. I could have done without the school marm hairstyle. This is not the Old West. She doesn't really need to wear her hair up on top of her head in a bun because professional women are wearing their hair in chin length bobs or slightly longer or shorter, but not buns. But, that's a minor thing. But it was just kind of like, have you people talked to any professional women lately?
Yeah. If I can interrupt just a second, that seems to be a running thing with Star Trek. I mean, you look at the women in the first season of The Next Generation, and they've, Deanna Troy's got this beehive thing going on. Sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. But, so I was looking at it from that standpoint of most professional women don't wear their hair up in a bun. But those were minor things compared to the character of Janeway. And like Robyn was saying, B'Elanna kind of moved into the chief engineer's position and did a really good job with it. And when had you seen at that point a female character in charge of the tech on the ship? And I liked the fact that B'Elanna was still kind of figuring her life out. And I liked the way that Janeway served as a mentor for her and kind of rehabilitated Paris, who was the bad boy juvenile delinquent at the beginning of the show. And everything just kind of gelled. And I think an indicator of how well Janeway functioned with the crew was at the end of the pilot when she had to make the decision that was going to strand them in the Delta Quadrant. And she did it, and she was still alive at the beginning of the next episode. So, I thought Janeway was terrific.
Now, right now, we're kind of in that next wave of a lot of Star Trek. I'm behind. I'll openly say I'm behind.
Well, I'm behind too.
When I look, the bits I've seen of Pike, the current incarnation of Pike, one of the things what I've seen, I've really enjoyed and liked. And one of the things that I've seen is that notion of he knows what's coming because you've got that end point of menagerie, right? You know that he's got that when he's got that knowledge, but yet it's still okay, I'm going to go do what I got to go do. He's still being that leader. And I think that's one of the things that I've seen in the parts I've seen that I've been very favorable of. And I am a big fan of Lower Decks. Now, part of that is because I have a very sick, twisted sense of humor. And, you're getting to see something that's not the main ship of the line. They're kind of doing all that secondary stuff, but you're still seeing Freeman as that captain and dealing with an unruly crew, primarily her own child, and dealing with some of the, to me, it's a really good blend of parody of all the series, some of the tropes, and getting to see how do we clean up the mess after, Picard's come through and everything's good. We're all good. We're good. We're moving on now. And all of a sudden it's we're going to deliver the gift basket and try to make all these things work.
And sign the paperwork.
And these notions of still seeing the fact that there's captains working their way up and seeing kind of how that works, even though it's a bit irreverent. That speaks to me, right? So, Dennis, out of kind of the modern streaming era of stuff, and I want to talk about Picard from Next Gen and the Picard series separately, but out of all the streaming stuff we're seeing out of Paramount, what are you thinking about kind of the modern captains we're seeing?
We're getting a variety of different people, different situations. We had our first lead alien captain with Captain Saru, who took the helm of Discovery for a while. We've had our first, not our first. What did I say? When Burnham finally took command of this Discovery, you knew that's where the story was always heading. But her path to the command was anything but straightforward. There were several points where she could have just veered off and gone off on a different adventure and been just fine. Especially at the end with Book, she could have just taken off with him. So I've really enjoyed those stories for the long form storytelling. Lower Decks is a hoot. I mean, it's laugh out loud funny, but it's like a love letter to every Star Trek series that ever was. It's so much fun. It's got, and Mariner is the perfect character because she is a Star Trek nerd. She loves Starfleet. She knows all the Starfleet stuff. And seeing that crossover episode between Strange New Worlds and Lower Decks, that was so much fun. Watching them struggle with not telling things. And then the whole thing with Spock, what was going on at that time. Did you catch any of that with Spock?
I have not seen that one yet.
Yeah. Do you remember in the first episode of the original series where Spock is laughing and smiling? We find out why. We get an understanding of what he is in the beginning and how it changes. Anyway, so I love the streaming stuff. Strange New Worlds, Prodigy, Lower Decks, Picard, and Discovery are all absolutely wonderful additions to the Star Trek lore. I'm absolutely looking forward to Section 31 with Michelle Yeoh. I mean, she's just such a powerful actress. I can't wait to see what she does. So, thrilled. I'm thrilled.
Nancy?
Well, I haven't watched a lot of the streaming. I don't really feel qualified to express an opinion about it because I've seen a little bit of Strange New Worlds, saw a couple of episodes of Discovery. So I think I'm going to pass.
All right. Robyn?
I love the new streaming stuff. For similar reasons that I loved the older stuff was it gives us a variety, kind of like Dennis touched on a little bit. We get so many different facets of what it means to be in Starfleet. So I've really been enjoying most of what we've gotten. I do love the fact that Lower Decks, like you said, is like a love letter to us, but it lets us make fun of us. You know what I mean? As opposed to, the jokes coming from the outside pointing at us. It's like us, having like the inside joke. I really love that about it. I am also really looking forward to the Section 31 show. I love Michelle Yeoh. I have the biggest crush on her. When she was Emperor Georgiou in Discovery, I had like so many heart palpitations because she was just an amazing actress and had such physicality throughout all of those scenes. I also really, really loved in the second half of the first season of Discovery where, they were stuck there for a while, as opposed to almost all of the other Treks, they're there for like, at I think max like 2 episodes, and then they figure it out and then they're back to Prime Universe. Whereas like for this one, it felt like they really had to figure out like what the heck is going on here. And they spent time there. They spent some time there. So I've really enjoyed what we got there. And I love the fact that Prodigy is something that is a nod to those of us who have been Trekkies for a while. But it's also really easy to bring in, the next generation of, no pun intended, the next generation of Trek fans, with kids. Mm-hmm. And having things that, parents can connect with their kids with, but it still feels really relatable to those of us who are adults. And I loved that one episode where they came across the planet who had, I guess in Trek terms, they had made contact, but they didn't mean to, and their entire civilization had formed around, the ideals of creating Starfleet. So they basically like replicated Starfleet as their own governmental structure on their planet. And so Dal came across them, and it's another representation of Starfleet aside from just what he had on the ship, and seeing how Starfleet impacted this entirely different group of people in a way that's totally different from how he and his crew were impacted. It was just a really heartwarming and sweet and cute episode to see those two groups together, and to see the representations and the nods to the original series in that episode as well.
So I want to touch a little bit on Picard. Now, I will admit I got stuck midway through season 2. I'm going to power through. I know what happens. I'm still going to power through at some point to see season 3. But I thought it was both interesting to see, bringing Picard back, to see a retired Picard, to see that notion of what happens when you put somebody like Picard out to pasture. That notion of what do you do with somebody that's been a hero for that long, and then now is just the next name in the record books, and still sending him out to just do the things that he's been driven to do. It was a point of character. So, Nancy, I'm not sure if you've seen Picard yet or not.
I've not seen Picard, so I'll have to pass on that.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So, Robyn, what were your thoughts on Picard? How they presented it, how they've handled that, and the Picard of the past versus the Picard of now?
So I have kind of a half answer, because I didn't watch Next Gen, but you can't be a Trekkie and not kind of know the ethos of Next Gen just from like osmosis. So in any places that I missed, I would always just ask my friend, like, is that important? What is there? Or I knew enough about like the lore, especially things also, not pun intended for Data's brother, but things that connected, I still had an idea of what was going on for the most part in the first and second season. In the third season, they leaned really heavily into connecting it back to the original Next Gen series. So I was able to follow along and enjoy the story that they told, but I could definitely tell that I was missing some nuance and some emotional connection, because I didn't have those ties to those characters. So for instance, like when they brought Seven into the seasons as like a Fenris Ranger, those are the times where I really got excited in how they pulled her in and incorporated her. Just from what I know of Picard and how he, within the fandom in general, was kind of, at least from my perspective, idolized as kind of like the prototypical captain. To kind of show him in that light, I thought was really an interesting take, especially because between him and they're kind of doing it now with Anson Mounts Pike, to kind of show that like this is like the ideal captain. And to have that person push back against Starfleet and say, you are wrong. This is not us. This is not who we are doing. Making the choice to use him as the person to say that, and seeing how, showing how Starfleet responded, to me was really interesting. And I thought it was another, example of where we're clashing again, where we have those human ideals and pushing back against like what do we really want to be, exemplified in that. So I really appreciated that they did that with it. But again, my opinion has to be taken with a grain of salt because I didn't see Next Gen.
Dennis?
You're right. There are some emotional beats that you surely didn't get, like the whole thing with Picard and Beverly Crusher having finally gotten together after 7 years of hinting that maybe they might. Yeah, that whole thing, and then the friendship between Geordi and Data is something that really grew on the Next Generation. I thought the first season of Picard was okay. It was a little slow, but I was, I just relaxed and let them tell me a story. And I thought it was an interesting story. And it brought in some interesting things and it gave Data a proper farewell. However, being a software developer, I know damn well you just have to make a copy. Anyway, season 2, I tell you the scene that I loved the most was when Q shows up and he's looking young still, and he looks at Picard and adjusts his look to look older. I love that. It was a fitting end of the 2-season arc, I think, because the 3rd season is very disconnected from the first 2 seasons. So it was a fitting end. And then the 3rd season was such my favorite character on all of Star Trek as of right now is Captain Liam Shaw. When he played up, it's like there's the admiral and the former captain of the ship that he's now in command of, and all, the brass is there. And when they hint they might want to borrow the ship, just with glee in his voice saying no. But his portrayal of a damaged, survivor guilt-ridden, angry but still effective commander, with those deep-seated emotions, that was brilliant, and I enjoyed that so much. Because Picard, yay, great, Picard. You know what? Yeah, for a while he was the figurehead of the enemy, and they killed a lot of people because of his knowledge. They dealt with it just a little bit in the opening of Deep Space Nine, but I think this one really hit the nail into hit it right on the head of the nail, and gave us what some people's impact was, and they did it with just, it was wonderful. I thoroughly enjoyed of any season I've seen so far. I think the 3rd season of Picard is probably the best Trek there is. But I do think for me, I watched every single episode of The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. I've watched it all. So I knew the progression. So that probably colored my view. Although there are significant episodes of Strange New Worlds which have my attention.
We still have that free curse card, right, Jim?
Oh yeah, fine.
Ahead.
So Dennis, when you brought up Liam Shaw, I was like, oh man, I love a good crotch of the asshole, and that's Liam Shaw.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, see, it is my hope somewhere either Liam Shaw was a twin, and there's another one that's the ill-tempered twin who isn't a captain yet. I'd love to see him. Or maybe Section 31 took a backup and they've got a copy they can give us. Either way, I would love to have him back. Yeah.
Time travel, there's always a way. So before we get to the important question of the evening, I'm going to throw out one small bonus question, mostly for my own amusement value. And Nancy, because you passed on the last couple, I'll make you start with this one too.
Okay.
Who from all the other crews would you like to have seen as a captain? We got to see George Takei get a very short stint as a captain after we were promised a number of series. We got to see Beverly Crusher be the captain of our own medical ship a little bit. We got to see little tastes. But who would you have liked to see get their turn as a captain?
Tasha Yar. I don't even have to think about it. She was a great character. She was the head of security on Next Generation and was actually one of the few things that, for me, Next Generation, the first season, as we've said, it just didn't gel. And I was terribly disappointed by it. But I liked her character a lot, and I was really disappointed when she left the show. So I'll go with Tasha Yar.
Robyn?
Oh, this is so hard.
Nobody ever said I played fair.
I think maybe I have two answers, and these are kind of cheat answers. So I'm kind of like harkening back to something Dennis said earlier in the discussion. I would love to see Prodigy get its full due and have, a full series with, several story arcs and character growth. And then the finale, the series finale, it flashes forward 10 years. All of the kids have been through Starfleet Academy, and now we get to see Dal with an actual Starfleet ship. That would just I would love it so much. Yeah. Either that or me and cartoons. I do love cartoons. If Mariner and Boimler, it's a similar thing where, the end of the series, Mariner finally said, fine, F it. I'll be your captain, but only if Boimler can be my number one. And we know he wants to be captain, but I feel like if she asked him to, he'd be like, you don't think so?
I don't know that I would want to serve with a Captain Boimler. I'm just saying.
No, I'm saying he would be her number one.
Sure. Where she could watch, she could keep an eye on.
Yeah, those would be like the series enders. So we've seen like their arcs, going from seeing them progress to, their Starfleet journeys.
Dennis?
There are so many good characters who deserve more. My initial answer, and this is one that I didn't even realize that I wanted to see until I saw her sitting in the chair. It's Captain Seven.
Hmm.
But we've already seen her sitting in the chair, and we know she's captain. So the one character that I would really like to see developed and eventually get her own command is Raffi.
Mm-hmm.
This is another character who's had difficult times. She's gone through some major stuff, but throughout the whole final season of Picard, you just saw her really grow and just and seeing her on the bridge again. Are we doing spoilers?
Sure.
Seven is captain of the Enterprise G, and her first officer is Raffi. And I just want that future where we get to see Michelle Hurd play the captain of her own ship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, though, they had a relationship, though, so they would have to make sure that they log that with the Admiralty. And I'm still kind of bummed that they split them up, because I definitely wanted to see, a sapphic relationship in Starfleet. We got the first gay, main couple with Discovery. I would have loved to have seen some more developments.
Yeah. If I may, maybe that's Raffi's motivation to get promoted and get her own ship so that they can resume their relationship.
Yeah. That would be kind of awesome if we had a show with Seven as the captain, and then to see them like going back and forth. It's like, I love you, but I can't be with you, and all their drama back and forth kind of thing. And they're like, you put me on this away mission because you don't want to talk about our problems. Kind of thing. Yeah.
You know, when I look, even though they kind of did it, I would have always been curious to see Tom Paris being a legitimate captain. But of course, Lower Decks took care of that. So we, you know, I would love to see Harry Kim as having to grow up and be a captain.
I don't think they put ensigns in charge of ships.
They don't. But I mean, to actually see him get past being an ensign, right?
If I may, as a former Navy person, my biggest complaint about Star Trek Voyager, and it's not a Janeway complaint because this isn't real, this is a writer complaint. You don't keep an ensign for 7 years, not when he's doing his job well. You advance him, you give him a promotion. And for God's sake, don't have him at one console the entire time. You move people around. Okay, never mind.
Then we wouldn't have all of the great memes
I know
about Ensign Kim not being promoted. There are some sweet meme gold from Ensign Harry Kim.
I am one of those people who feel like not having an entire series of Captain Sulu was a complete waste of potential. I'm sorry. That was the worst missed opportunity that they've ever done.
But the number one, and it wouldn't last long, but I would love to see just one episode, is that of Captain Nog. The first Ferengi captain.
Didn't we get to see him as a captain in the finale of The Next Generation? Was he a captain of that ship?
I don't think he was the captain.
Maybe not.
He joined Starfleet.
I know he joined, yeah.
But remember from DS9, you kind of see that hint of it. I would like to see one episode of Captain Nog, the Ferengi captain, negotiating away.
Yeah.
That's just my own sick, twisted ideas.
Well, I wish it could happen, but they'd have to recast the role, and that sucks.
Yeah, unfortunately. All right, so I'm going to ask the operative question of the evening. I'm going to be cold and heartless and ask the question that everybody's been sitting through all of this all night long for. Who is your number one captain? Robyn.
It's Janeway. It's definitely Janeway. And I know that over time, experiencing, because again, my first introduction to her was during my formative years as a teenager, but even as an adult, going back and rewatching it, even having the additional content of new Trek, just the foundation that she laid for what I view as Star Trek idealistically. And also, she got her crew home. She held them down through 7 years with no backup, no support. They had to make a way. They had to make new relationships. They had to barter. They had to come up with, new plans, but still stay true to who they were. They had to do so much with very limited resources without any type of real support from the Federation. She will always be my number one.
Dennis?
From the standpoint of who would I want to work for the most, Captain Christopher Pike, played by Anson Mount on Strange New Worlds. His version of Pike is the kind of captain that you can trust to listen to your opinion, whether or not he takes your advice. He's going to listen and he's going to consider it. And if you get in trouble, he's got your back. And he treats the ship like a family. And he is the father figure. I've really enjoyed his portrayal of the character, especially given what happened in Discovery season 2, where he finds out his future. That puts a whole different twist on where he's going, and gives some excellent storytelling opportunity, like the one where they retold that Romulan episode with Kirk, where they showed what happened differently because he was captain, and he does have a different style from Kirk. Yeah, that's my favorite right now.
Nancy?
Janeway. She edges out Cisco in terms of who would you want to work for. As much as Kirk will always be a favorite, Flash and Dash get old. I mean, I love watching Flash and Dash. I don't think I'd want to live with it. And Cisco seemed to me a more even temperament. But Janeway did all those things that Robin said. And I'll admit that part of my fondness for her is she was the first woman to step into the chair, and she pulled it off really well. So Janeway.
Well, as much as, Kirk is my first captain, and as much as I pulled from him, and looking at Kirk and knowing that without that, we would not have everything else, right? Mm-hmm. But the truth of it is, it was 60s TV. There was a great deal of the storytelling, the flash and dash as you go. But I mean, again, we know what we've got. Picard, I will tell you, especially seeing what I've seen out of the older series of Picard and all the stuff that Picard went through, becoming Locutus, all the rest of this, but yet still being able to come back and find that poise, great captain. But the one that I probably would go for the most would be Cisco, because again, he navigates a certain level of chaos and in a certain way. And that probably looks the most like my day-to-day average would be DS9.
He punched Q.
Exactly. That would be one of those determining factors that pushed it over the edge. Was anybody's like, nah, get the hell off my station. I ain't having that drama here. I got enough. Yeah. Go. So that would be ultimately probably my favorite captain as far as that is. Well, before we set sail for that second star to the right, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you guys. So, Robyn?
Again, my podcast is Diversity Issues. You can download our episodes anywhere you get your podcasts, or you can check out our website, diversityissues.libsyn.com, Libsyn.
Dennis?
You can find me at automatedempire.com. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, Discord, and Mastodon, and Blue Sky, and all that. But my books are on Amazon and easy to find. Just search for Rise of the Automated Empire. 4 books, wonderful series.
Nancy?
My website is nancynorthcott.com. It has social media links there. I'm still on X, or whatever they're deciding to call it this week, and probably will be for a while. I'm on Blue Sky as Nancy North. I'm on Facebook, but I'm not there very much. So if you want to interact with me on social media, X would be currently the place to do it. And my next release, which is coming out this summer, is The Speaker for All, which is a novel in the Outcast Station series.
And I am Jim Nettles. You can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentialsworkshops.com. You can find me at creatingpros.com, and of course here at ConTinual, and it looks like I'm being beamed out of here. So until next time, we'll see you again soon. Thanks for joining us.